headquarters and turn it into, quote, a museum of the deep state. Former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz was initially picked for Attorney General. However, he withdrew his name from consideration amid a reported lack of support in Congress due to a heap of controversy. And now in his place, Trump has selected Pam Bondi. Bondi served on Trump's legal team during his first impeachment and was Florida's former Attorney General. She's considered a staunch Trump loyalist. Senate hearings for these confirmations are expected to begin in just a few weeks. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Erin Haynes. She's the editor-at-large for the 19th News, host of the Amendment podcast, and an MSNBC contributor. And also with me is Philip Bump. He's a national columnist for the Washington Post and the author of The Aftermath, The Last Days of the Baby Boom and Future of America. Phil, let's look at the future Senate confirmation hearings. Who has the biggest uphill battle? And conversely, is there anyone, at least of the high-profile picks, who you think might get in pretty easily?
Yeah, well, I mean, those are sort of the core questions, right? I mean, I think that you articulated the ones who are probably the most controversial, the Hegseth and the Kennedy, and I think that's important to remember that we are at this point right now. The people who are watching this show are more tuned into what's going on than are most Americans. Once these confirmation hearings actually start, once it gets more coverage, once Americans start paying attention to the extent that they're going to at all, I think this becomes more difficult for the Republicans and for the Trump administration. I do think it's the case when we talk about situations like this, we're talking about political capital, right? We're talking about how much political capital, how much Democrats want to actually try and fight these picks, and how much Republicans actually want to defend them. And I'm not sure we have a good read yet on what the political costs are going to be for Republicans if they do stand with a Pete Hegseth, if they do stand with an RFK Jr. It's hard to say right now because it is so early and because there is relatively low awareness of who these people are. But I think the challenge for Trump is going to be that it will not take very long for these picks to potentially become gigantic headaches, forcing Republican senators to say, okay, I can't back all of them. Who am I going to select? And I think that's going to depend on what the narrative around them is as the hearings start.
Erin, in the last hour, we talked about the absence of black choices with respect to some of Trump's cabinet picks. We are talking primarily about Herschel Walker as an ambassador, and then Scott Turner as his pick to head up housing and urban development. Aside from that, there's a complete void virtually. What do you make of that, and what should America be interpreting from that absence and that void?
Yeah, I mean, Charles, I think it's interesting that you do have a lack of black men being nominated for these cabinet positions, given, Trump's outreach to black men during the election and the support that you did see among some number of black men for him in November. So I think that certainly, like any constituency, black men are looking for those votes to translate into representation. That's not really something that happened, even though you had several kind of high-profile black Republican male surrogates for Donald Trump when he was on the campaign trail in November. Another observation that I just want to point out, I mean, less than half the picks that are named so far are women. There isn't much diversity among the group of nearly 36, as we pointed out at the 19th. His first, President-elect's first term had one of the least diverse cabinets in history. So this is a cabinet, if confirmed, is tracked to look like leadership also in the GOP-controlled House when they take office in January, where white men are set to dominate. So with no women, no people of color chairing any committees in the House, how is any of this really representative government for an administration that is supposed to be governing on behalf of everyone?
Hardly building a multiracial democracy at all. Phil, Donald Trump has made a lot of promises around what he wants to do on day one. Is there any particular pick that you believe would be most helpful in terms of helping execute his agenda, whether that's on immigration, whether that's pardoning January 6 folks, stopping the war in Ukraine and everything else in between? Who do you think might be his biggest asset going into day one, given his number of promises?
I think it's probably Attorney General. The Attorney General has a lot of leeway, obviously, over what's happening with, launching criminal investigations, which Donald Trump has indicated that he intends to do, targeting his political opponents. It has the Department of Justice has an enormous amount of influence as well over immigration policy and how immigration is enforced. I think that's where you want to look if you're thinking about which Trump appointee is the person who is going to be the one who is closest to him and what it is that he wants to do. I think we're talking Pam Bondi and AG, and I think that's why Matt Gaetz was the first pick, because he wanted someone there who was absolutely someone who he could rely on, which is sort of the nice way of putting a lapdog, right? Someone who would, no matter what, do what it was that he wanted. I think Pam Bondi has shown over her career that she's willing to do that as well. And so I think that's the position where he's going to want someone who is as loyal as possible, as soon as possible.
Aaron, I'm not sure that two letters and one number have ever caused as much controversy and infighting than the notion of H-1B than we've seen in the past couple of days. The H-1B visa conversation has really erupted in a firestorm of controversy and infighting within the Republican Party. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have now sort of found themselves on the outs with hardcore MAGA right. And I'm wondering, is this a preview of what we can expect as the Republican Party moves forward? Can they keep it together to even get these confirmation picks through? And how long is MAGA paradise going to last into this administration?
Yeah, I mean, normally you would think that the honeymoon period would at least go into, inauguration, maybe the first 100 days, but things already seem to be kind of going off the rails. This food fight that you mentioned that we've seen over the last several days over the H-1B visa issue, along with what we already saw with the showdown, right? The government shutdown that was narrowly averted could be a preview of what we can expect, especially with these confirmation hearings, right? Like, we know that President-elect Trump's election wasn't a mandate, but it feels like we're also maybe kind of learning that he may not quite have the grip on his party that many people assume. These confirmation picks are not a done deal. You still have senators now that are holding out and holding off, and not to mention, people like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Laura Loomer, or who knows who else who could come out and hop on Truth Social or X and post something and derail, just the latest, step in the transition or these confirmation hearings. So, it does feel like we're a long way from, say, the Republican National Convention, when you had people kind of getting back in line and making up with President-elect Trump, or even, these meetings that have been happening, these feel-good meetings that have been happening in Mar-a-Lago. Could these be derailed if somebody hops on social media and says that they have an issue with any of these picks? I think that this H-1B visa back and forth that we've seen, it could be a preview of what's to come with these nomination hearings.
Trouble in MAGA paradise could equal rocky waters for the rest of us. Thank you, Aaron Haynes and Philip Bump, for getting us started on the second hour of Velshi. And still ahead, a tale of two grandfathers, one black and one white, who bought homes in Detroit in the early 1900s. 100 years later, their stories had different endings. I'll explore how discriminatory housing policies have forced many homes in black neighborhoods to go into foreclosure. Plus, I'll speak with a young man who's already a voice for the Democratic Party and for his peers. His name is Noah DeBrasso, and at just 13 years old, he knows what's at stake in the country for his future and for future generations. Stay tuned.
What if you could not only feel better, but feel better than ever? Hone Health helps men like you boost energy, strength, libido, and weight loss. You'll work with a dedicated physician to create a personalized, proactive plan. Treatment is delivered to your home, helping you relieve symptoms quickly while confidently reaching your long-term health goals. Enter into a new era of you, beginning with your comprehensive at-home test from honehealth.com.
Stay informed on the biggest issues of the day. MSNBC has you covered wherever you are. Watch, read, and listen. For the in-depth coverage and analysis you need, stay with MSNBC. Morning Joe, weekdays 6 to 10 on MSNBC.
This morning, we're continuing to follow breaking news out of South Korea, where a passenger plane crash landed at an airport in the southwestern part of the country. Officials say 179 people are confirmed dead, with just 2 crew members surviving and sustaining moderate injuries. The plane, which originated in Bangkok, Thailand, was carrying a total of 181 people. Let's get right to this with NBC's Megan Fitzgerald, who's following the story from London. Megan, what do we know?
Well, look, Charles, as you just mentioned, we're talking about a full flight here with 181 people when it crashed into a barrier wall at the end of the runway there. We want to warn you, though, that the footage you're about to see is graphic. So if you take a look at this video here, you can see the moment when this plane comes in for a landing and it's just skidding along the runway after its landing gear apparently failed before it crashes into the wall and erupts into this massive fireball. It's really incredible to think that just 2 people managed to survive. But sadly, the other 179 people on board died. Now, flight radar tracking the plane's journey from Bangkok, Thailand to South Korea didn't appear to show anything unusual, but officials say a bird strike may have started the deadly chain of events, causing the pilot